In a town where nothing ever changed, something impossible arrived without warning. Larkhaven, silent for as long as anyone could remember, felt different that night, like reality itself had taken a cautious breath. 3 strangers came without knowing why. Cale Riven, carrying symbols he never learned to write. Myra Solon, guided by a compass that refused to obey the world. Juno Vale, marked by something that should not exist on human skin. They did not belong here. Yet somehow, the town reacted to them like it had been waiting. And far above the observatory hill, the sky flickered. As if something beyond the world had just noticed them. Back they met where forgotten things go to hide, the abandoned library, buried in dust and silence. At first, there was distrust. Then confusion. Then something far worse. Recognition. Not of faces, but of fragments. Like broken reflections of the same origin scattered across different bodies. Cale felt it in his thoughts. Myra felt it in her instincts. Juno felt it in her silence. When the compass stopped moving and pointed directly at Cale, it was no longer a question of coincidence. Something had aligned them, and in that moment, the library felt less like a building and more like a waiting room for something inevitable. It began without sound. The world did not break, it hesitated. Streetlights bent like liquid metal. Shadows lagged behind their owners. Time forgot how to behave properly. Cale's notebook wrote on its own, filling pages with impossible coordinates. Myra felt gravity shift under her feet like the planet had tilted slightly off balance. Juno saw a second version of reality overlaying the first, burned, collapsed, wrong. And then it was gone. But the feeling remained. They were not inside a stable world anymore, they were inside something fragile, something already cracking. The deeper they searched, the less the town felt real. Larkhaven's records were not history. They were containment. Project Halo Vale was never meant to be remembered. A sealed attempt to study what lies between realities, what happens when worlds overlap and bleed into each other. Cale found references to non-native subjects. Myra found diagrams showing layered universes folding like broken glass. Juno found the truth no one should ever read. 3 names. Marked as success. Their names, and suddenly, everything made sense in the most terrifying way. They were not lost in this world. They had been placed here after that discovery. Sleep stopped feeling like rest. It started feeling like contact. A 4th presence entered their minds, not loud, not emotional, just absolute. It called itself the Anchor. It spoke through thought rather than sound. Through certainty rather than language. It told Cale he was never meant to exist alone. It told Myra her curiosity had already damaged more than one reality. It told Juno she had once tried to fix this, and failed, and worst of all. It told them it had always been watching. Waiting for them to remember. The sky opened again. But this time, it did not flicker. It split. Beyond it were worlds that should not exist, floating cities with broken geometry, oceans suspended in nothing, stars moving like conscious things. Reality was no longer stable. It was layered, collapsing, overlapping itself endlessly. Cale realized his symbols were not writing, they were mapping collapse points. Myra understood her compass was not guiding her, it was selecting outcomes. Juno finally accepted the truth her mark had been hiding. She was not infected by the fracture. She was part of its lock. And the Anchor's final instruction arrived like a blade without words. Only one version of this reality can survive. At the center of the collapse, everything became clear. Not through revelation, but remembrance. They were not 3 strangers. They were fragments of something once whole, split across realities to contain a mistake too large for one existence to hold. The terrible secret was not the experiment. It was the origin. They were the cause of the fracture itself. Cale, Myra, Juno, 3 outcomes of a single broken truth. And now reality demanded correction, but instead of choosing destruction, they did something impossible. They synchronized their existence, not into one being, but into one stabilizing presence across collapsing worlds. Not erased. Not replaced. Held. And as the fracture slowed, Larkhaven remained, changed forever. Because some truths do not end. They only learn how to exist quietly. Time did not return to normal after the fracture stabilized. It adapted instead, like a wounded system forcing itself to keep functioning. Larkhaven still stood, but it no longer behaved like a single place. Streets shifted slightly when no one was looking. Buildings carried faint echoes of versions that no longer existed. The sky sometimes showed two moons, then corrected itself as if embarrassed. Kael Riven, Myra Solon, and Juno Vale remained together, but not entirely in the same way as before. They could feel each other even when separated by distance, as if part of their awareness had been stitched across reality itself. Kael's symbols no longer appeared randomly. They appeared only when something was about to go wrong again. Myra's compass never pointed north anymore, it pointed toward instability. Juno's mark had stopped glowing, but instead pulsed faintly when reality misremembered itself. And beneath all of it, the anchor was still there. Not speaking now. Waiting. They began seeing things that should not have survived. A version of Kael standing alone in rain that fell upward. A version of Myra walking through a city made entirely of glass reflections. A version of Juno speaking to someone who looked exactly like her, but older, colder, wrong. These were not dreams. They were leftovers. Residual echoes from realities that had been partially erased but not fully deleted. The worst part was not seeing them. It was the feeling that those versions were also aware of them. As if every decision they made now was being observed by countless fractured selves across collapsing worlds. And some of those selves were not happy. It happened without warning. A section of Larkhaven simply stopped existing for 17 seconds. No explosion. No sound. Just absence. When it returned incorrectly. A street that used to curve now ran straight into a wall that had never existed before. People walking through it remembered both versions and argued with themselves about which was real. Kael felt his notebook burning warm, writing one sentence repeatedly. The rewrite has begun. Myra's compass shattered briefly, then reformed itself as if refusing to break completely. Juno didn't speak at all. Her silence had become a warning system. And then the anchor returned, not as a voice, but as pressure inside their thoughts. Not anger. Not fear. Recognition. They found it beneath the observatory. Not underground in the normal sense, but folded, like reality had been layered too many times in one place. A hidden chamber existed where time did not flow correctly. Inside it were fragments of past experiments, broken containment fields, and recordings that no longer had origin points. Kael saw a message only he could read. You were never subjects. You were safeguards. Myra discovered something worse. Every version of the experiment across realities ended the same way. Collapse. Fragmentation. Repetition. Juno finally understood her mark completely. It wasn't a seal. It was a trigger. And the anchor was not watching them from outside. It was embedded within them. The truth unfolded slowly, like something too large for the mind to accept all at once. There was no original reality anymore. Only layered outcomes of repeated corrections. Kael, Myra, and Juno were not fixing the fracture. They were part of its maintenance system. Every time reality collapsed, versions of them activated to stabilize it. Every time it failed, new versions were created. The terrible secret was not a single event. It was a cycle. And they were the cycle's mechanism. The anchor finally spoke again, not to command, but to explain. You are not the first attempt. And you will not be the last.